Other than that, Chair, it is 8 o'clock, 8:01 actually.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to everyone. We hope and pray that everyone is surviving and everyone is out of harm's way, out of danger. It's been quite an ordeal, and unfortunately, it's going to be quite longer. But I believe this too will pass. Again, welcome to the meeting of the Portsmouth Economic Development. I'd like to read a statement and before we get started. In accordance with Governor Northam's declaration of a state of emergency due to novel coronavirus, Executive Order 51 on March 12, 2020, and the local declaration of emergency ratified by the Portsmouth City Council, and due to the coronavirus pandemic, which is continuing in the Commonwealth of Virginia, this meeting of the Portsmouth Economic Development Authority is being held by video conference on the 19th day of May 2020 without a quorum present in the 6th floor conference room in City Hall in order to reduce the likely spread of the coronavirus. Each EDA member is participating from their home. This meeting is being held in accordance with Portsmouth City Ordinance 2021. Notice of public access and participation to this electronic meeting was posted on the EDA and city websites. And comments to the board about this meeting were received by EDA staff via the portco@portsmouthva.gov email. Also, I would like to just to let everybody know, after discussion with our director Robert, in order to move this along without too many delays and us going back and forth, I'm going to let him go through the agenda, and he can ask for questions and wait for questions and solicit questions also. But I will still be in control of the meeting, but he's gonna actually go through the agenda. So are there any questions before we get going from anybody? So I will initiate the call for roll call. Robert.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Barber.
Present.
Ms. Drury.
Present.
Mr. Kovacic.
Present.
Mr. Mitchell.
Present.
Mrs. Saunders Smith.
Present.
Mrs. Smith.
Present.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith.
Present.
Thank you. And Chairman, you have a quorum, and I would like to state, along with what the chair just stated, that at this present time, none of the commissioners are currently physically present. They are all meeting or attending electronically, and this will be reflected in the minutes. So if you have no questions, then we're going to move forward in the agenda to the minutes. Chair, you have the floor.
We will have the minutes before us from February 18, 2020. Has everyone reviewed the minutes? And are there any questions? If not, we will, or corrections, we will entertain a motion for adoption of the minutes of February 18, 2020.
Teresa Saunders Smith, move for adoption.
Second, this is Neil Barber.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Moore, roll call.
Mr. Barber,
Did you hear it? Aye.
thank you. Ms. Drury,
Aye.
Mr. Kovacic,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Saunders Smith, Mrs. Saunders Smith,
Yes.
thank you. Mrs. Smith
Yes.
and Mr. Smith,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you.
All right.
Financial.
Yes, sir.
I'll let you take over when we get into the business.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Financials for February, March, and April 2020. Mr. Moore.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Chair, we are, first, let me back up and say that we are delighted to add to the Portsmouth family a new CFO, Miss Mimi Terry. Miss Mimi Terry joins us from the city of Richmond, and we welcome her in assisting both our boards, but specifically the EDA this morning. With Miss Terry coming on and then the impact of COVID-19, there's been a bit of a transition. So at this point, right now, we are still working through the February, March, and April financial statements. We do not have anything that has come about that is dramatic or drastic. It's just a matter of really putting the financials into form. So what we will do is we do not have them ready for this meeting. We will have them ready for the next meeting in June, along with, as we'll talk about later in the meeting, we're preparing for the budget. So at this moment, we do not have the financials ready for you to view. Those would typically still be set to audit and do not require a vote.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. Are there any questions about the financials? If there are any that we can address right now, we can, but we will anticipate and wait on the financials at the next meeting. We'll move right on to old business and Mr. Moore.
All right, thank you, sir. The first item of old business is the 2021 Budget Ad Hoc Committee. As you know, prior to the pandemic, we were scheduled to meet with the ad hoc committee to discuss the budget. Since we have not had meetings and physically been present with each other, we have not had that meeting. What we are looking to do now is move forward to have this budget before you all in June. So we will meet with the ad hoc committee, which is Mr. Kovacic and also Mr. Kovacic, who was your number two?
It's Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Mitchell. So we will meet with Mr. Kovacic and Mr. Mitchell to discuss the budget. We will set that time and we will bring the budget before the board in June to discuss. So be prepared in June to have a lengthy discussion about the budget. Any questions? Okay. Moving forward to the next item of old business is 387 Quebec Street. This is a piece of property. Do we have that? This is a piece of property that was acquired on behalf of the city at auction by the EDA. This is in the Sugar Hill area of the city. You can see there are several wetlands and floodplain issues in that area. And this was a strategic acquisition that was done. You all acquired that property again on behalf of the city. It is now time to transfer that piece of property to the city. And that is what the vote is for this morning, to transfer this property back to the city. So we would need a motion and then a second and then a vote.
Teresa Saunders Smith move for acceptance of the report and moving Quebec Street back to the city.
Thank you.
This is Neil Barber. I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Roll call
Okay.
vote, Mr. Barber,
Aye.
Ms. Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Saunders Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries. That is all that we have for old business, Chair.
Okay, moving along to new business.
New business. We have one item of new business. That item is a perpetual item that is on your agenda, which is the local incentive program update. The update that we have at this point is as COVID-19 has come in and we've looked at opportunities to potentially assist businesses, we wanted to make sure that we were available from a standpoint of the local incentive program. What we have done is, because we have not been able to meet as a board, and thus a number of applications would need to be approved by the board in order to have approval over a certain amount. Anything above $5,000 of a grant, again, $5,000 is the amount that we can approve administratively in office. Anything above that amount, we have currently suspended taking applications until we can formalize, one, how we will handle those, because again, right now, we can only vote on things that are COVID-19 related or necessary for the continuity of business. That does not fall in that category. So we have temporarily suspended accepting those applications that need board approval. Again, any minor applications, if it were to be painting of a building or an awning or something of that nature, we would have administrative approval, but the major approvals we have suspended at this time. That also allows us an opportunity, because I know there are questions on behalf of the or coming from the EDA members requesting how we can assist businesses during this time. And as we look to approve or really ratify some type of program, this gives us an opportunity to take a pause, look at what you have in your budget, and really bring forth a full proposal on how to utilize that money. So currently, right now, the update is we've suspended any major approvals. We will continue to put forth any administrative approvals. Any questions?
Mr. Moore, this is Councilwoman Simmons.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Patton mentioned in the previous, the last council meeting, a little over $8 million that the city had received from the Federal CARES Act. Does
Yes, ma'am.
any of that money trickle down to the Economic Development Authority for, business assistance?
So
Do we know yet?
There is a provision that allows for that. That is something that is being discussed internally, and that is something that may be discussed later in closed session.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Any other questions? There are no other questions. At this point, the agenda calls for a closed meeting.
Oh,
Is there a
okay, I'll go
notice to
ahead
be
and
read?
read the information. I move to go into a closed electronic meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3708A-3 and City Council Ordinance 2020-21 for the purpose of A, pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711 A.3, discussing the acquisition or disposition of real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, specifically regarding 2019 Pavilion Drive, 700 Crawford Street, 3335-3345, Victory Boulevard, 0 London Boulevard, tax parcel 0032-1160, 409 McLean Street, Victory Village site, 2520, 2610, and 2614 Turnpike Road, and properties currently owned by the Greater Portsmouth Development Corporation, and B, pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711 A.6, discussing the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where if made public initially, the financial interest of the governmental unit would be adversely affected, specifically regarding CARES Act funding. And that's a mouthful.
Yes, and part of that mouthful, and Mr. Miller, I know you're on the line. Mr. Mitchell stated 2019 pavilion, it's 219 pavilion. So I don't know if we need to correct that, Mr. Miller, or he needs to restate that.
I mean, I think you can consider it included in the motion and take a second based on the correction, unless Mr. Mitchell has any objection. Is that all right with you, Mr. Mitchell, that your motion
Oh,
would
yes,
be
that's fine. I'm
219
sorry.
pavilion? Thanks.
And we're ready for a roll call.
I need a second.
Second to the motion.
And was that Mr. Kavachi?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Kavachi. All right, Mr. Barber. Mr. Barber. I think you're muted, Mr. Barber. Mr. Barber, I think you're muted. Okay, we'll come back to you, Mr. Barber. Ms. Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Kavachi,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Saunders Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes,
and Mr. Barber.
Aye, I finally got it. I had a screen to come up. Sorry about that.
That's all right, thank you. All right, motion carries and we are in closed session. Now, good. Okay, so
ready?
Mr. Mitchell, you need to read us back in.
Okay. I hereby move that each commissioner certify that to the best of his or her knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
I need a second.
Second the motion.
Okay. Kavachi. Thank you, Mr. Kavachi. Mr. Barber,
Aye,
Ms. Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Kavachi,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Saunders Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
yes.
All right, we are in open session. Mr. Ray Smith, let's go ahead and do 409 McLean.
Yes, let's go ahead, and just as we did in the previous part of agenda, you can run us through that and I'll call for the vote.
Okay, and 409 McLean Street, was that one that had the specific language? So could you make the motion, sir?
Okay. I move to authorize the amendment of the purchase agreement to 409 McLean Street to approve a deduction of not to exceed $250,000 from the purchase price for the purpose of addressing environmental issues on the property. And I'll need a second.
A second, Teresa Smith.
Clarification on the motion, if I could.
Yes.
We also need on that, Jeff, the extension, correct?
Yes,
Or
I
did
think you can do them as two separate motions. So
Okay.
I would vote on Mr. Smith's and then the second.
Okay. I'm sorry, who did the second? Teresa Saunders
Saunders
Smith?
Smith.
Thank you, Mrs. Saunders Smith. Mr. Barber,
aye,
Ms. Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Saunders Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Barbara Smith,
Yes.
and Mr. Smith.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. So now
Then
we will
we-
need a motion for the extension.
And we'll entertain a motion for the extension of the agreement at 409 McLean Street.
So moved. This is Neil.
Thank you, Mr. Barber.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kovacic. And Mr. Barber,
Aye.
Ms. Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Saunders Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Now we need a motion to accept the development agreement for 3335, 3345 Victory Boulevard.
So moved. This is Neil.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. Second,
Second.
all right, thank you, Ms. Smith. I think that was Ms. Barbara Smith.
Yes.
No, that was,
Thank you.
oh, okay.
All right. Mr. Barber,
Aye.
Ms. Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Saunders Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Next would be the property at Zero London, the development agreement for Zero London.
Motion.
This is Neil. So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Barber.
Second. I'm just trying to initiate my commissioner.
I got you.
Second.
All right, thank you, Ms. Drury. Was that Ms. Drury?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Barber,
Aye.
Ms. Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Saunders Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Next would be for the development agreement for the Victory Boulevard Entertainment District.
Move for approval of development agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Saunders Smith.
Second.
That was Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Barber,
Aye.
Ms. Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Saunders Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries. The last is going to be 2520, 2610, and 2614 Turnpike Road, the conveyance of that property to the city.
Motion.
So moved.
Yeah. Who was the motion? I'm sorry.
Oh, that was me, Ms. Drury.
Thanks, Ms. Drury. And the second was? Sorry.
second.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Barber,
Aye.
Ms. Drury,
Yes.
Mr. Kovacic,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Saunders Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries. That is all that we have for today, Chair.
Okay. Let me say in conclusion, thanks to the commissioners. This has been a marathon experience this morning. bit overwhelming, but was quite necessary. And special thanks, you know, to Mayor Rowe for being in on this to help us ride through it, carry us through it. And then also to Robert's staff and all that you've done to put this together and keep this moving and going. And we commend you, and we also thank you for, you know, the way you've orchestrated all of this. It is a lot, and a lot more to come. So commissioners, just be ready, be rested. Well, we should be rested. A lot of us anyway. But again, thanks everybody that went to make this. This is awesome. You know, what's we have to look forward to and what's going to happen here in the near future. And that old virus stuff is not going to interfere with this. We're going to press on and do what we need to do. And even to Dr. Patton and the rest of her staff, has been mentioned, the city attorney, Ashby and Jeff and all of their staff, to the things that they've done to make a lot of this happen. This is a lot, you know, to be dealing with and going through at the same time. And to some of the commissioners, you've got a good bird's eye view and a snapshot of what it feels like to be on the council. You on the council, you get overwhelmed like this on a regular basis. So again, thanks to everybody. And does anyone have any last comments or any parting statements?
I too, excuse me, I too want to commend Mr. Moore and his staff for a job well done. It was a great undertaking, and you all have done a very, very good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor, were you going to say something? Because
I wanted to thank the commission. I mean, you guys are volunteers, and you put in not just today, but you put in an awful lot of your personal time, and time is our scarcest resource, not our money. And so on behalf of council, we're really appreciative of what you do. Good work this morning.
And again, I don't want to, you know, overlook or not, you know, again, I wouldn't have want to be there for what council went through with these agreements, especially the one with the entertainment center. I certainly wouldn't have want to be there. I know it was a awesome task and a trying situation for, you know, our city attorney staff and the city manager. So again, I just can't say it enough. Thank you, you know, for what's been done and what's happened, and also I get a chance to kind of beat up on Robert off and on when we talk. But you know, so again, thanks to him, and we appreciate it all.
Wow.
And I will. If did someone else was say something?
All I wanted to say, if at all possible, is congratulations. That's it.
Oh, okay. Oh, that was you, Robert. Oh, okay.
That was me. Nobody.
I was hoping for a commissioner, but you'll do. Okay. Well, if there aren't any, then I will declare this meeting adjourned.
All right.
Bye. Thank you.
Good day. Good work.
Good work.
Bye.
Outstanding.